Hello, we're going to be working on sequencing stories. Our goal today is I can sequence a story by recounting. Remember, recounting just means to retell. By recounting important events in order. When we are sequencing a story, you want to use transition words such as first, next, last. These help you to stay on track to tell the order in which something takes place. When would you use sequencing? You could use sequencing to retell stories that are familiar to you. You could use sequencing to recall and recount the events that you've done throughout the day, like in the morning. First, I woke up. Next, I ate breakfast. Last, I brushed my teeth. You can also use sequencing when you're reading a recipe. You have to make sure that you follow those events and those steps of a recipe in order, or else your recipe is not going to make sense. Today we're going to be using sequencing when recounting a story. In class, what we had done is we made kind of a fat snowman with a smaller bottom portion. At the beginning of the story, you are in charge of figuring out who the characters are. You'll find out also what the setting is. You might even get a small glimpse at what the problem in the story is going to be. So I'm going to just put it to the side. A small problem might happen. So I'm going to just put a small problem. In this middle, I like to make this part much bigger. The problem starts getting big. So in the middle of a story, the problem gets bigger. There might be some people or some characters in a story that are trying to solve the problem, but there isn't a solution in the middle of the story. We find the solution at the end of a story. So when you're thinking about the order of events that happen, the solution comes at the end of the story. The solution just means that the problem is solved. So the base word of that is solved. Problem is solved at the end of the story. In order to kind of sequence these things and keep them straight in your mind, we're going to do just I'm going to read a shorter story, and then we'll talk about how to recall and recount those events as we're going. So it's called The Wolf in Sheep's Clothing. This is just an Aesop's fable. It's not too long. Here we go. Once there was a wolf who wanted nothing more than to eat one of the sheep that lived in the meadow. That sounds like it could be starting a little bit of a problem. But the shepherd kept a close watch over the sheep. Every time he saw the wolf, he chased him back into the forest. So far, the characters that we have a wolf, we've got some sheep, and we also have a shepherd. And this is taking place in the forest. So it's following along the same pattern that we talked would happen. Then one night, the wolf found a sheep's fluffy white fleece. The shepherd had forgotten it. "Aha!" cried the wolf. "I think this fleece might solve my problem." Ooh, so the wolf had a problem because he wants to eat a sheep. Here's something that he's going to do. Now, we know a lot of things about wolves in stories. I bet you can predict what's going to happen next. With a tug and a pull, the wolf dressed himself in the fleece. Now he looked just like a sheep. The wolf trotted into the meadow wearing the fleece. He walked among the sheep, and this time the shepherd didn't chase him away. Uh-oh. So there is a problem. Now this wolf is in the meadow, in the field. The shepherd thinks that this wolf, who's hungry for sheep, is actually a sheep. This time, the shepherd didn't chase him away, and that very night, the wolf carried off a large sheep to have for his dinner. The next day, the wolf wore the fleece again and strolled freely among the sheep. But this time, the shepherd did notice the wolf. He said to himself, "That looks like a fine sheep for my stew tonight." But before the wolf could leap away, the shepherd grabbed him, and that night the shepherd enjoyed a delicious stew. Now that story gives you a little bit of a picture that might not be what you had expected. So if we're thinking about what happened in this story and we want to recount that story so we can tell somebody else, we would start by saying once there was a wolf in a forest. He loved to eat sheep. There was a shepherd that took guard of the pasture, I suppose. And one day, the wolf found a fleece. So that's how the problem starts to happen. So the wolf puts on the fleece and pretends to be a sheep. But is that the huge problem? Just because he's dressed in a sheep's clothing? No. The problem is, while he's dressed like that, the shepherd doesn't know it, and that wolf takes home a sheep and eats him for dinner. So the problem is getting bigger. It's getting bigger. Now he just scooped up one of those sheep and he's taking it. The wolf takes a sheep to eat for dinner. The solution comes when the next day happens. So the next day happens, the solution, what we have is the farmer spies this person, the shepherd, spies this wolf, I guess I should say, finds this wolf out in the pasture and says, oh, that looks like a mighty fine sheep I want for my stew. The shepherd scoops up that wolf that's really a sheep, or a wolf sheep, I don't know how to explain all of that. But anywho, picks that mighty fine wolf that's dressed as a sheep and eats him. And that's how the problem stops. So the shepherd eats the wolf. So we know all of the extra details that would make up the whole entire story that we said, but we only want to talk about the most important things, and that's what we do when we're sequencing a story and we're recounting it to tell to somebody else. You're going to have your own job, and it's going to be to sequence another story, so I'm going to post another link for a story that you have to sequence. Make sure you talk about the characters. Make sure you talk about how the problem gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And if there is a solution for your story, which I promise you there's a solution, then you need to tell that as well. As you are recounting the story and sequencing it back, make sure that you use some transition words. First, next, then. You can use last, finally. Y'all catch the drift. You know these things. We've talked about them a lot in class. I know you can do great on this. Sequencing is really fun. This is just how to sequence a story, but we can also sequence a lot of other things, and we'll discuss that in lessons to come. Take care. Bye-bye.